Hello, I'm Giri Prakash from TheFederal, and in today's series, we are going to discuss a very interesting book on infrastructure, authored by Mr. Prasad Padode. He is a chartered accountant by education and has over 26 years of expertise in the infrastructure space. He has won several awards in publishing and journalism, and very few may know about this, but he started his career with financial journalism as a co-founder of one of India's best-selling equity magazine called The Wall Street Journal in 1986. Then he pivoted to get into the infrastructure space. Today, he heads the First Construction Council, which focuses on infrastructure, real estate, construction, sustainable cities, and economy. And the book, and let me tell you right away, has won high praise from none other than Nandan Nilikani, who's the co-founder and the non-executive chairman of Infosys and the founding chairman of UIDAI, Aadhaar. Welcome to the show, Mr. Parode.
Thank you, Giri.
So let me first, when I was reading through the book, one thing that came out very clearly was that a book like this can actually can turn out to be a bit biased in terms of how it is dealt with, and perhaps the best thing about this book has been that while you have chronicled about the pre 2014 and post 2014, it's an extremely well balanced book, and you brought out a lot of information, and the best thing is that once you read it, you get a very good idea about the infrastructure sector in the country. But let me start off with pre 2014 era, and that's where the book starts off with as well. And I would like you to share your thoughts on it. One thing that came out very clearly was that while the government's intention was very good, it was beset by a lot of scams, one thing or the other. How do you look at the pre 2014 era?
Thank you, Giri. Thank you for sort of pointing out the unbiased nature of the book. Uh, yeah, I was actually quite concerned about that, and I didn't because I wanted to say everything as it is. Um, it's written mainly for India and for Indians actually, so that they understand its potential um, and the policies that need to drive us there. So, coming to a question about pre 2014, that the one thing we must give it to the previous regimes was the fact that infrastructure actually started off with, former Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee's Golden Quadrilateral project, and a whole lot of new things like policies of public private partnership, of tolling on roads. All these things started then, and they were therefore challenges. In fact, I remember that when I went to the US and Canada, and we had taken the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways secretary. At that time, there was quite people were still wondering how India can have such a large public-private partnership program where such a lot of money is being spent on roads, and we are making the private sector equal partners. So it was quite ahead of its time, and obviously there were challenges in the way people went for bidding, or whether it was above board, transparent. All these things we've navigated these turbulent times during that time. I think what happened was the 2005 to 2008 period was a very glorious period around the world. And of course, it had a bad, sad landing with the Lehman Brothers crash. But during that period, a whole lot of our contractors got overly enthusiastic because they were seeing the reflection of their order book positions in the stock prices of their companies.
Mhm.
And they started assuming developers' risks. So, meaning I'm constructing a road, but I'm paying the government. It was a negative grant. The government was willing to, give a viability grant, they were saying, we will give you money for giving us the contract, and we will build it, and we will collect it from toll. Such was the enthusiasm. And obviously, that was short lived, because after this Lehman crash, even though India survived the immediate aftermath of the crash, by 2010-11, a lot of companies stumbled and fumbled. Uh, that apart, what really took the entire country into a paralysis was the period between 2010 and 2014.
Mhm.
And that is very remarkable to actually see. While we may say, there were a lot of scams, but each scam was very unique, and it actually paralyzed one portion of our business so squarely that
Yeah,
all of them came together, the entire country got paralyzed. So whether it was the Vodafone case, which had the retro element, which actually got the foreign investors completely off our, they went off our menu. They didn't
yeah,
want to see India at all. Or it was the 2G case, where so many companies which had already paid for licenses, like the Norwegian companies, etc., lost so much money, unimaginable kind of losses that they have. And then, of course, we had the whole, Jayanti Natarajan's environment, whole pile up of cases that were going on. So, and then the Commonwealth Games, where again we just barely escaped, humiliation, complete humiliation. So all these put together actually is completely set us off the course. And what needs to be seen is that when things like this happen, the whole one generation actually suffers. We are
yeah,
back. We went back by one generation.
yeah. It is true. It is true. Especially regarding the Vodafone case, the retrospective effect, the retrospective tax that one talks about. Uh, the one thing that you actually highlight is the fact that Pranab Mukherjee kept on defending it in spite of the fact there were quite a few ministers who were opposed to it, and informally also told him about it. But he ended up winning the Bharat Ratna eventually, right? But that was a very the retrospective tax was a very retrograde kind of stand taken by the government. Um, can you sort of narrate that about what exactly went into the thinking behind this, number one? And number two, of course, Jairam Ramesh and then later Jayanti Natarajan as well. Um, she kept a lot of files, didn't clear it, and all that stuff. What is the kind of impact it had on infrastructure?
So on Pranab Mukherjee, actually, see, at that time he was quite, uh, in fact, cash strapped in terms of bringing in funds into the country, because economically we weren't doing well. So
Mhm.
our growth had completely stalled, and they were not actually somehow not seeing where the growth was stalling. So in fact, I studied this later on, and in fact, I spoke to Mr. Anil Swarup, who was appointed. He was a former coal secretary, and then he was appointed about in the project monitoring group. And he said that actually it was all what he did as a matter of getting things moving was just meeting people and sorting out their problems, which were
Hmm.
quite basic and quite just a matter of coordination and sort of removing the ego from the transaction kind of
Yeah,
moves that
yeah,
he made.
yeah,
But
yeah.
that was not happening. The coordination between various ministries, everybody was sitting on egos. And so Pranab Mukherjee did not go deeper into the reasons why the economic situation had sort of reached that stage. And because he just wanted to bring in that kind of funding. It's, today, if you see, when you say tax terrorism, everybody's got targets. And even I'll tell you, recently also there is some GST case, and even Infosys was sent some notice, 32,000 crores and all. So these are things which actually scare foreign investors away. And ultimately, actually, one should actually go and see that all these high profile cases, actually how much really got realized. And you'll realize that this was just done to create a large number because the targets were set so high. Otherwise, they don't manage to realize anything from this. So he actually, thought that this was a way that he could really, where would they go, because he had got them completely because of the law, because he had changed it, and he would be able to probably bridge the gap, because Madam Sonia Gandhi told him, Chidambaram told him, then they were all concerned whether this kind of a thing would have impact from his own part, and
Yeah,
yet he
yeah.
went ahead. So now, coming to Jayanti Natarajan, there were files which were worth more than 7 lakh crores. Those days when I used to, when I was, of course, writing for my magazine and all, we would ask people and they would say it's gone to the Environment Ministry. It would seem to them that once a file goes to Environment Ministry, it's
It's as
gone.
good as gone.
You may see the light of the day, or you may not see the light of the day.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
we forget these days, but it was so tragic that, imagine, even builders, I mean, real estate projects, their files are going to Environment Ministry in the center, and
Yeah.
people are sitting over it. And later on only we have realized that those files were found at her residence, and she
Yeah.
was taking out her angst with her party president, because she was going to be removed, or she was
Yeah.
brought in for a certain purpose, and their internal politics actually played out, but sadly affected our country's progress.
Yeah, I mean, there are two related questions, but both of them I should have asked you later, but I'll ask them right away because they are very apt as of now. Number one, look at the coal scam. Bureaucrats were hounded. The retired bureaucrats were also hounded. Some of them are in jail, which I feel is the negative aspect of whatever that happened. Because it's usually the people in power who take decisions and they get the work done from bureaucrats and order below. But these people end up, getting the rough end of the stick. That's something I would want from you regarding that. The other one, moving forward, that is post 2014, and I'll talk to you later about 2014 as well. That administratively, um, while very few scams actually come out in the open now, unlike what it used to happen pre 2014, what do you exactly think about how well these infrastructure projects, for example, and administrative part of it is run now?
So, it was a well established fact by the Supreme Court that the resources of natural resources of the country need to be done in a fair auction. And
Mhm.
therefore, the highest bidder obviously would take precedence over everything else.
Hmm.
But in this case, particularly, they had set up. Obviously, they were favoring individual companies, and this happened in case of 2G also, where the tenders were suddenly changed to a certain date and a certain time, which was most convenient to certain companies only. So imagine you give a date of, for example, you give a date of 31st December, and then suddenly you say, no, now it's decided it's on 16th December, and it is
Hmm.
at 2 p.m. and it will close in 15 minutes. So, that virtually such a childish way it was done, that
Hmm.
it obviously seems so obvious that it is done to favor some, and ensure that a fair kind of a auction doesn't take place. So obviously then it got proved and in court, and people have had to be punished for that purpose. So I think there it was because the rule was not established, people were doing that, and in the process certain people who just followed their political masters directions got trapped in the whole thing, and unnecessarily they suffered. I think they suffered, administrative officers suffered unnecessarily in the process, like I think the secretary Cole, who was working under former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, also was brought to questioning and things like that. So I think, but that law is, even though it is settled, even today it is being again revised when Tesla's Starlink is now approaching spectrum allocation, and Reliance and Airtel are objecting, and they're saying now follow the auction process and not the administrative process. So
Yeah,
here
yeah,
again, this situation is somehow panning out, and I hope the law is clear about it, follow the course of the law. Otherwise, again, we will see some ramifications of this.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
Coming to your second part, before 2014, the kind of scams that they actually were anti-development. So,
right.
I mean,
Sorry.
development. So, for
Okay.
example, Commonwealth Games. I mean,
Hmm.
you had just 2 months before the Commonwealth Games, you had buildings not put up. They were in a shabby condition, bathroom, toilets not there, furniture not brought in, and you are getting athletes from all around the world to come and occupy that. And then last minute you tell them that these buildings are not complete. Let's find some other rental places for you. And the bridge collapsed. Going to the village. So
Yeah.
it was very shabby in terms of our reputation, in terms of, and in fact, I interviewed former CM Sheila Dikshit, and I asked her about the status of the projects, and she just diverted the into the questions, answering the questions to someone else, and we'll give you a list and things like that. And it looked like they were not ready. It was very obvious. But what has happened now in the kind of situations that have come post 2014 are not anti-development, but I think sometimes they are anti-standard operating procedure. For example, this electoral bond issue which has come. Now, there are large contractors who have funded electoral bonds and have also got the contracts. Now, it is obviously there is a conflict of interest that if I am getting awarded a contract and I have contributed to the ruling party, then obviously there is some favor, and are you going to be able to question me if my quality is not good enough?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
room for some sort of conflict, and that's
Yes.
why I'm worried about the quality of infrastructure sometimes when contracts are awarded to such people who have contributed to electoral bonds, and
Hmm.
therefore they have been given contracts. Because
Yeah.
when for example, the Jojila tunnel, which is taking place in north of India, which is the
Hmm.
most difficult tunnel project, Zojila project, which is taking place. It is so it is throwing up surprises every time you sort of go dig deeper into the mountains, and
Okay.
therefore the cost of the contractor will continue to increase, and therefore it needs to be done with such precision, and
Yeah.
only experienced hands can actually do it. I hope they are doing it well, but I have written to the Prime Minister that they ought to appoint a infrastructure audit,
Yeah.
for such projects, because we cannot have any mishap in such projects.
That's true. That's true. That's true. Yeah.
Somewhere, yeah,
Yeah. Sure.
somewhere post that there is no paralysis. People, all particular states are, whichever are in the ruling party states, they're all for development. It's only that some places there are sometimes shortcuts used, and that is what is sometimes affecting quality. Or there are pressures. So, for example, you want to inaugurate a temple, you want to inaugurate a coastal road, you want to inaugurate an airport, and you put pressure on. And even though the project is not really fully complete, for example, Ram Mandir. Now, Ram Mandir was supposed to get completed by December 24. It's not yet complete, but you wanted to complete only one portion of it for showcasing. But then people suffer. When they went there, they found certain things lacking, infrastructure is not complete, then you don't get the full experience.
Yes.
So
Yes. Yes.
these are some of the things that there is so much pressure of projects and timely completion, and then these kind of shortcuts are adopted.
Before we move further, another thing I should say is that infrastructure is a very dry subject because it consists of all roads, airports, and stuff like that. But you made it very riveting, and I must congratulate you for that.
Thank you.
Uh, uh, there are two other things that I wanted to talk to you about. One is the 2G scam. Most people say that it is actually the loss was very notional in nature. It didn't really happen. What do you have to say to that?
See, that time the Comptroller Auditor General, he had a quite a free hand that was somehow given by the government, because
Mhm.
either and before that nobody even heard of the CAG making any comments,
Yeah,
and during this time he made such audacious comments. So, for
yeah,
example, it was like that if you think that a 1 acre of land can sell for a certain value, you just extrapolate, multiply 1,000 acres by that same value, and say this much of a loss has taken place.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, no, I mean, land, for like everything else, you cannot extrapolate. It's not the
Yeah.
best price cannot be taken as the median price of
Yes. Yes.
everything. And
Yeah.
that's what most of the calculations in the CAG by the CAG have been of that kind. And that's
Okay.
why this, in fact, that was a mistake by them, because if you, they thought that they're probably attracting attention by giving a big number. But in
Mm-hmm.
that sense, then people tend to then not believe what you have actually reported. So that goes
Yeah.
the other way, that
Yeah.
people think, oh, these guys don't know how to calculate and they just put big, big numbers. So
Yeah.
from that perspective, it was notional, because
Mm-hmm.
you can see that so many users will be there and the average revenue per user will be so much, and therefore multiplied by that, if they had given it to this person, they would have got this much amount of money. That's all
Mm-hmm.
speculative and
Yeah.
estimated highest revenue per user, kind
Yeah.
of a model. That's
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
it's functional.
That's right. So okay. Now coming to post 2014, you have talked about demonetization, and then I'll come to later about the quality of say bridges, roads, and all that. Uh, where do you put demonetization in terms of the kind of context that you give, in terms of was it the single most impactful kind of decision which actually derailed to a large extent the economy? Where do you put it among the say the top five or the top three in terms of the pecking order about the decisions taken by Prime Minister right from the start till now, in terms of how the decisions have gone extremely wrong?
So I think no doubt about the fact that demonetization had, for what it was intended, and it is proven now. By now, we all have, the evidence that it didn't um give the outcome that it was supposed to give. Neither
Mm.
there was counterfeit currency, which was being talked about, that is going to create havoc in the markets. That was too minuscule an amount to be, for demonetization to be used. Nor was the fact that we are all going to convert to digital instead of, that was the need. And the fact that cash economy will be completely crushed. In
Yeah,
fact, cash economy today is even more thriving than it was in earlier.
yeah,
So, in all respects, demonetization did not achieve its objective. In fact, it had a very debilitating effect on these small and medium scale enterprises.
yeah,
A
yeah.
lot of the formal economy completely got washed out, and I think they have not come back. So, what
Yeah,
the lag effect in the economy that continued for a time, because then came GST. So again, the informal sector got hammered because
absolutely.
compliance cost was so huge that
Mhm.
they were trying to wake up to, not that GST is not necessary. It's a great tax, great development move, but the timing of it, because it followed the demonetization, it was crushing. And
Yeah.
till date, I think the largest number of SMEs have shut down, which also I've stated in the book, which is also a reported a fact. So all these have been caused by this particular activity. And then again, COVID we've had, which
Cool.
is of
Yeah,
course no, but it did happen.
yeah,
And so, really speaking, if you then they, of course, the government came out with the mudra loans and they've tried to support this sector. And then we have seen now that microfinance loans are the worst ones, reporting the highest delinquencies.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
it was bound to be. It was bound to be. So I think these whole this track of demonetization, GST is a good move, but the timing could have been better. And then COVID, all the three things. I think even in COVID, I think luck was with us that we were able to
yeah.
post the second. We corrected the whole situation. Otherwise, we had not done the right things in the immediately the first time over. But then, of course, it was a natural disaster, but nobody had a right knowledge about.
Yeah, I mean, if coming back to the bridges and roads, they get
Yeah.
inaugurated much before they get tested. And even the Vande Bharat one, which was supposed to actually be an alternative to flights. That's why one of the reasons why the ticket prices are were high. and the fact that they were supposed to go at a faster speed. It's not been happening right now. While the train itself is good, but they are not as per the stated objective, that has not happened. Having said all this, and having written that book and probably interviewed hundreds of bureaucrats and politicians and all that, the final question that I have for you is, what goes behind making these decisions which actually impact the entire country itself? What goes behind that?
Uh, you mean in terms of, so I mean
Is it
vision,
driven?
budget?
Yeah, is it driven just by making money for the party, or is it something that actually the intentions are good, but it's just that somewhere along the way implementation is completely goes for a top.
No, I think that part. I think our current ruling party and the NDA has done well, and in fact they started. In fact, when even Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji was there, the Prime Minister, I think how India can be put forward in a growth mode, they knew very well, and this is in followed. So I think ideology wise, that India should be a developed nation. I think it follows the party's ideology, and which is quite similar across the both 2 3 times that they have come to power, and even currently they're driving the whole process forward in that sense. So there is a vision to make India developed. But what is happening? A lot of things are reforms are still pending. So ease of doing business is not there. So today, if judiciary again is clogged with cases, 5 crore cases plus. So where we need reform to attract foreign capital so that our infrastructure can be built, because the pension funds abroad, they have got long term money. We need long term money to build infrastructure. The
Yeah,
Gulf, the Middle East, they used to invest in the Western countries. Now there is since 9/11, they've got a big, sort of a mind block, that they don't want to really put all their eggs in one basket. So there, and our Prime Minister has established good connect with the Middle East. Now, Middle East can pump in good money in these kind of projects, but we've got to make it simple, easy, one-stop shop kind of situation. Our labor reforms, we haven't been able to do that. I mean, you talk about comparing with China, but China can have 50,000 workers in a factory, and you can get the benefit. Now Bangladesh is having a problem, but we cannot set up big factories, and even our biggest exporter has got 20 factories in one state. So then you
yeah,
don't get economies of scale,
yeah,
and
yeah,
labor
yeah,
doesn't get the recognition. So there are lots of deficits yet. We cannot, unless we fix those, we cannot become a developed nation. Every time we take 3 steps, 2 steps will people will things will pull us down.
yeah, yeah,
So, for example, now you take the Mahasamriddhi Marg, which is being built Mumbai to Nagpur, 90% complete, that 10% is still pending. Your freight corridors, you were mentioning Vande Bharat. Now the freight corridor, Delhi, Mumbai industry, it's 90% complete. Everything is 90% complete. That 10% is costing us so much in the last 10 years, because
yeah,
if they were complete, then your trains would have moved faster, because your
yeah,
freight would have moved in the freight corridor, and
yeah,
passenger would move in passenger.
yeah,
So
yeah,
these complete projects are a big drain, because we've invested all the money, but we
yeah,
are not
yeah,
realizing the outcome expected. So I think our Prime Minister needs to see that, is to set some deadline and complete these mega projects, because they are fantastic projects, and they will just spur our growth. But we need to fix those. We made so much of infrastructure, tourism. We are not tourism ready, and tourism can be equivalent to like a software
yeah.
earning that it gives.
Service
So
industry, yeah.
we need to fix all these things to really attain our developed nation status.
One final question again. 5.4% growth, GDP growth, and one of the reasons is that the country is not spending enough on infrastructure. And while the cabinet says that they will that kickstart later, but 5.4% is a reality, right?
Yeah. So I think we are going to be the government has spent less. See, let's face it, private capital has not moved. Still, it is still shy. It is still treading with care, and these things happen because there is a flip flop of policy. So if Jagan Mohan Reddy is there in Andhra and then he stops projects, or if Mr. Uddhav Thackeray says that if I were to come to power, I would stop somebody else's project. If you keep doing this stopping, then investors are going to feel hesitant. We have
Yeah.
to have a common policy that once a government commits on a project, then whichever party comes to power, they should abide by that. That should be common. I mean, whose money are you going to waste? You're wasting our money only, taxpayers' money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we need to get, if you want continuous flow of FDI to come into our country, which is a great opportunity today, we need to show stable economic policies. And that is why we are now, so if the government is spending and private capital is shy, and if government decides to spend less because they are busy in elections, the GDP growth slows down. Simple. So our growth slowed down because our government was busy in elections.
Yeah.
So now, of course, they will tend to spend more. But in any case, I think profitability has been hit for the corporate sector, and that
Yeah.
was another key reason. We've hardly seen any, profits have actually halved
Gone.
or gone 30%
Yeah.
lower.
Yeah.
Input
Yeah.
costs have gone up.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
that will even out in the coming year.